there is a Twitter discussion, and there's a guy I follow on there, Constant Pressure. He's a black belt. He's got a bunch of good information on Twitter and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But he was in a discussion, and it popped up on my feed, and it had to do with inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because it just seemed like now he was asking questions to someone making a bold statement. He was like, no, really, I'm actually asking.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy then backed down and was like, I don't know. It just doesn't seem right. So let me give you a little bit of the story here. There's a prominent person named Cernovich on Twitter that was talking about, you know who that is?
No.
Oh, he's like a political
I'm not on Twitter.
pundit. Okay. But he was talking about working out. And he had said that putting ice on muscle strains is like kind of bullshit. Okay. And then he said, he's like, I got attacked by it. Like people were just like, no, ice muscles and like your the RICE acronym, right? Rest.
Yeah, it's completely outdated.
Okay.
And I talked about that in our
Yeah, I was
previous
gonna say,
podcast. We
how
talked
dare
about
you,
injuries.
Phil?
It's called a callback, people.
Continue, sir.
Gosh. So someone says this: from an evolutionary perspective, it makes zero sense to ice an injury. Inflammation is the body healing the injury. Then our friend Constant Pressure goes, but isn't too much inflammation? Too much inflammation is detrimental, though. No, like as a question mark. Then the guy responds, I guess I'm just saying the idea of using ice to stop the body's natural inflammatory response seems to be going against the body's own way of healing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, our friend goes, no, but I'm asking for real. My guess is too much inflammation can impede performance and lead to further injury. Is that correct? The guy basically got no response. And I said, I'm going to ask on the podcast. The one response he did is, I'm no expert. From my experience, after rolling an ankle, you want the inflammation to go away because you have the no mobility and can't run around or play. But maybe that's just a quick fix and the tissue isn't really healing as well if it was left alone.
Okay. There's a difference between acute inflammation,
Okay.
which is, from the direct inflammation right after an injury, and chronic inflammation, like you see in diabetics and things like that.
Okay.
Chronic low-level inflammation is definitely bad. Okay. It is a driver of vascular disease, heart attacks, neurodegenerative changes. I mean, that's why diabetes is so bad.
That's bad inflammation.
It's chronic low-level inflammation. Acute inflammation, and we talked about this also in our cold water immersion podcast, where I recommended not to do cold water immersion right after a strength training session.
Mm-hmm.
Wait to the next day at least, because of his point is exactly correct. The inflammatory response is there for healing. That's why I also said, I'm going to call back to that when we talked about injuries, that I said ibuprofen is impeding the healing process because it's an anti-inflammatory, right?
Okay.
So that guy's correct. What we do, what can be helpful is elevate and compress the area to get the swelling. So swelling is a byproduct of the inflammation, okay? So you can compress and elevate, and then early mobility is the key for that.
So the original injury was a back strain. Back strain.
Muscles, I don't think ice has a place.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that's what these guys are mainly talking about. Yeah.
Joint inflammation, swelling around a joint, some initial ice just to help reduce some of the initial swelling.
Okay, just initial after injury.
Yeah, just initially, just for the swelling. But you don't want to be doing that. I mean, because he's exactly right, where that healing process, the inflammatory component is a necessary part of the healing process. We're just talking about when an ankle blows up and gets huge and you can't mobilize it, right? Sure. That's where elevating and maybe one session of, 1 or 2 sessions of ice just to get the swelling down a little bit would be the only goal behind that.
And that's the only purpose of the
correct.
The
yeah, exactly. For muscles, a terrible idea.
Okay.
Muscle strains, you want blood. So what happens when you strain a muscle? It's micro tears, basically. The muscle spindles that we've talked about before, those sensory component that are embedded in a muscle monitors excuse me, gosh, stupid braces, I can't talk.
You're just drunk.
I know. The rate of stretch that will get it disrupted so that you are getting a low level tension in that muscle. In other words, it's contracting. Heat you want on there so we can get blood flow in there, because that contraction of the muscle kind of decreases its ability to deliver oxygen to the muscle and blood and waste products.
To it, or
yeah. So I'm a much more of a fan for muscle strains of heat on that.
So what about what he's asking is too much inflammation?
There's no such thing. Acutely. Your body just does what it does.
When we're in the perspective of these injuries is what we're talking. We're not talking about the other stuff. We're talking about
the inflammatory component happens. Of course, if you have, like, there's diseases that are, the hallmark of them is too much inflammation, like autoimmune diseases. Rheumatoid arthritis is one of them.
And we're not talking about that stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. So to an injury, the inflammatory response is what it is. You're not going to, like, I want to dial this inflammation down.
And I think a good example was, if anyone follows football, but Russell Wilson, I think a couple of years ago.
The finger thing?
It was either his finger or he had an ankle injury. But he came back. They said it was going to be 6 weeks. He came back in like 2 weeks. And his whole thing, he's kind of an odd guy, but he was like, every day I worked. I didn't rest.
That's right.
I didn't just sit there. He kept it mobile.
Yep.
He was same with, like, there's a story right now because they flew to London.
Yep.
And he has a hamstring strain, and the whole team was saying in the aisle while everyone was sleeping, he was doing mobility stuff in the aisle on the flight to London.
Exactly. I'm going to tell you a story about that. Andrew and I were down last November, about almost this time last year, down at the UFC Performance Institute for Dr. Dre Spina's FRS, the internal strength model. And he told a story about his own knee reconstruction. So he had some pretty major knee surgery. And at the 30-day follow-up, he followed exactly the FRS principles of early mobility, slow progressive loading to build up that connective tissue again. And for his 30-day, I forgot how long the follow-up is, but he came in the same day some of the other folks that had the same surgery that day, and they were basically hobbling in on crutches. He comes in and does a full squat, right? Because...
And this is the same thing that you did with your...
abductor. My adductor tear.
Adductor.
Yeah, that groin muscle that was torn.
And you were back in half the time.
I was back rolling again in 8 weeks as a 51-year-old at the time with a full adductor tear, which is... So, yeah, I mean, I agree 100% with that approach. That whole rice thing is completely outdated. Even the guy that came up with the rice thing says, I was wrong.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Okay. Yeah. Oh, I'm good. We brought that up.
That was a great, and that guy, what's his name again?
On Twitter.
Yeah, what's his name?
I don't even know how to say his little it's like I don't know. Constant Pressure is
the other guy though.
Well, the guy that strained his back is Cernovich, but the guy he was talking to, Constant Pressure, is the whack.
Well, whoever the guy he was talking to is exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it's good. Good to know. It says he's just a fitness guy. He actually has like 300 followers, not many, but he's an ex-D1 linebacker, fitness nutrition expert.
But he is exactly right with that inflammation component. Yep.
Oh, it's great to know.
That's an awesome question, and it kind of brings back a lot of our previous episodes. That people can go back and listen to if they want to dive deep into that. We had one on injuries, one on mobility, so
cold
therapy one, when you should do it, when you should not. Yeah.
And also heat and sauna and stuff like that.